It's meant to be a lot of fun. Usually something that you're gonna have in a festive environment, and if not, possibly for maybe a hangover, which means you had a festive night. My name is Jesus Cervantes, mostly known as Chuy, so everyone please call me Chuy Cervantes. I'm the chef de cuisine at Damian and Detroit in downtown Los Angeles, just outside of downtown in the Arts District. Damian is a Mexican restaurant under the Casamata Group, owned by Chef Enrique Olvera. Most of the menu is focused on seafood and otherwise focused on the local produce here in California, which is quite abundant. Today we're going to be working on the ceviche. So the ceviche is one of the dishes that we've had at Damian since the get-go. What does change from the dish is the vegetables that we serve with the fish, and then obviously the fish itself, whatever is best available from here in the coast of California. And sometimes we go all the way down to the coast of Baja California for our catch. And then otherwise, like mentioned, we visit the market and see what's seasonal, what's beautiful, and we mix it together with our fish and obviously some nice citrus juice. So today, we're gonna work on the summer version of our ceviche, so we can go ahead and get started. Whenever you make ceviche, you generally wanna use a softer white flesh fish. Not necessarily so soft, but something that can stand up to the vegetables, but still break down in a little bit of the citrus juice, allowing it to become soft enough for you to enjoy with tostadas, with the other vegetables that are incorporated in the dish. So today we have some campachi that I filleted this morning. This campachi is coming from Baja California, but otherwise, as mentioned, we want to stay as local as possible. So if we don't have rockfish available to us here in the coast of Southern California, we'll travel down to Baja California and we'll use the campachi. The campachi is a little bit more of a firm texture. It's in the amberjack family of fish, so a little bit of a higher fat content than the rockfish that we would normally get from here from Southern California. That one's gonna be a little bit more of a softer texture to your flesh. So definitely a preference, but always recommended, choose whatever's best available to you, choose whatever's local to you, support your local fishermen. So I'm gonna take a bowl here and I'm gonna create the cure for our fish. What you're looking for is not big clumps of the zest. The zest will kind of want to clump up together since it is a little bit more moist. But once the salt and sugar has incorporated well, you'll end up kind of more with this dust of separated pieces of zest rather than big clumps. The reason why is, one, we want it to be evenly distributed, but also two, you'll see that by the time we finish curing this fish, we don't rinse it off. We don't necessarily get too aggressive with it. A lot of the flavor is gonna come from the cure itself, so we're simply just gonna brush it off. Really, the idea for the cure is to release as much of the moisture from the fish while at the same time flavoring it, and at the end you end up with a little bit more of a firmer texture. So at this point, I would just leave this in the fridge for about an hour. And while that's happening, we can start preparing the rest of our ceviche. All of the vegetable work is pretty simple. We're not gonna do anything beyond some knife work here. The red onion, quite simply, we're gonna quarter it. I don't like to remove the layers before I cut it, just because I wanna keep as much of the natural shape. I feel like whenever we take an onion and cut off the ends and then peel it that way, I find that you lose that really beautiful edge, that curve. You want to use red onion. Generally, when you're making a ceviche, there's a bit more bite, a bit more spice to it. And then at the end, I think it mellows out and has that really nice sweetness that we all love of the red onion. White onion tends to kind of get lost a little bit whenever you're making a ceviche. The celery, it is important to use the inner part of the stalk. It's much more tender and less fibrous. And also too, we're gonna use these little leaves here to garnish. So I'm I'm gonna pick these off and leave them here with my cilantro that I'm also gonna use a little bit later to garnish the dish with. You can cut them in chunks, in quarters, in halves. You can use really any tomatoes you like from the market. The sizing that we're using on our knife work here, kind of the rule that I've come up with, none of it should be any bigger or any harder to eat than the fish. The fish should be the center point of our ceviche. It should highlight, and none of this should hide that there is fish in the dish. So the only thing that I'm gonna cut the same size as the fish will be the avocados. The reason why I want cubes to contrast the size or the texture of the fish. So we'll have cubes in similar size. Everything else should add in maybe a thin slice of crunch from the cucumber, maybe a nice juicy bite from the tomatoes, but nothing should be any bigger than the fish, because then at that point, one, we're struggling to enjoy the fish next to that, and then two, we're gonna top it on the tostadas and it's just gonna fall apart and fall all over the place. Ginger, the older it gets, the more astringent it gets, the more bitter it gets. The younger it is, the sweeter. One, if you're at the beginning of the season, usually towards the middle of spring, start of summer, they have a product called young ginger. That's gonna be less fibrous, a little bit more sweet, and generally that ginger flavor that we really love, and not that super astringent flavor that we can sometimes get. If you can't find young ginger, what you can do with your regular ginger is just boil it a couple of times in water. And what that does is it just helps to rinse off that really astringent flavor that it could have. Whenever you make ceviche, whenever you eat any kind of raw fish preparation, don't skimp out, don't try to use a lesser product, because at the end of the day, it is part of what we're actually doing when we're highlighting raw dishes. We're highlighting the quality of the ingredients themselves. I know Chef Enrique really loves to eat his ceviche in a tortilla like a taco rather than on a tostada, so it becomes very fun and preferential. I think that's the cool thing about a ceviche, is it's fun. It's meant to be a lot of fun. Usually something that you're gonna have in a festive environment, and if not, possibly for maybe a hangover, which means you had a festive night. So as you can see here, the fish has kind of begun to release a bit of that excess liquid that it has in the flesh. It's beginning to absorb the flavors of the cure, the lime zest, the sugar, the salt. Really what's happening there with the sugar and the salt is a balance of flavor. So this here is the loin that's on the back of the fish above the spine. And then this here is what's called the belly. So obviously hanging on the bottom side, the belly. This part here is a little bit thinner and a little bit firmer already, even before. Once we get to the point of dicing it, we're just gonna be careful to make sure that our chunks there are the same size as our much more fleshy loin side. So that way we don't have super thin, small, wonky pieces. In order to clean our fish here, depending on the fish that you're using, we're gonna take off a bit of this dark muscle here. So a lot of people think that that's, they call it the bloodline. And I think there's a misconception that it's actually blood. It's not blood itself, it's just a muscle that runs really near to the blood that's running on the spine. So you're totally okay to eat that. But since we're making a ceviche that's a little bit lighter in flavor, we don't want to overpower. It's got a little bit more of a fish quality to it. If you think the flavor of tuna, kind of that strong flavor. So once we have our loins ready to go, we're going to cut strips that will then cut into dices. Olive oil goes in first with a touch of salt. So the way we make it to order in the restaurant is we'll add the olive oil to the bowl, and then kind of vigorously mix with a touch of that salt. And what's gonna end up happening is the bit of protein that is being released from the fish already is gonna start emulsifying with that olive oil. So if you could see, there's no more loose olive oil hanging out in there. It's all been kind of mixed in and emulsified with the fish. So that way now when we add the juice to this, we don't have a separation of olive oil and citrus. And again, we'll mix. Now all of our vegetables can go right in, and our lime juice as well. This is definitely a ceviche that we're making a little bit more fresh and to order. This is not something that we want to sit for too long. So if you're making this at home, definitely wait for your guests to be ready to eat this. You can definitely have all of your stuff prepared and then just kind of waiting for that moment when everyone says that they're ready to go. The lime juice itself will not only cook the fish, but it'll also start to soften all of your other vegetables, and you won't have that really nice crunchy ceviche that we like. So we're just gonna garnish this, like I said, just to make it look nice and pretty for our guests. We have a little bit of extra of that red onion, just to kind of highlight it over the top. And then here are these celery leaves that we reserved. And that should give us just a nice, bright, sweet celery flavor to our ceviche. And then over the top, just one more garnish here. We have really a traditional garnish to ceviche, is our cilantro. Once you have this ready to go, you are picking your favorite tostadas, crackers, salsas, chili oils. Have fun at that point. Your base is good to go. It's fresh, it's bright, it's cold for the summer. So here we have some garlic chile güero mayonnaise and then habanero salsa. In case any of your guests like it super spicy, it'd be nice to have a little salsa next to it. And these are some tostadas that we've just made in-house.